Okay, so before we proceed and add any new functionality, I kind of want to build on what we already have, and that is right now, both playable characters can attack the enemy, and the enemy can attack the two playable characters. But other than seeing the damage appear over the enemy, we've yet to add the damage over the players, you're not getting a lot of feedback. So usually there's some kind of indication, like either the enemy flashes or you have like a brief particle system that appears like an explosion or something. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add a particle system to indicate that a hit has happened. So let's go to Game Object, Particle System. Let's put that particle system on top for the time being. So for Renderer, Ordinate Layer, let's change that to 10. Let's change the shape to a circle. Let's rotate that towards the screen. You can either use this middle tool here, or you can just change the number here, grabbing the red line and rotating, or you can just manually change this to -180. Particle size is too big. Let's shrink it. So start size, let's bring that down to 0.2. Let's increase the emission rate to say 125. And this is just really, I don't want to say that it's random, but making a particle system is a lot like sculpting in that you have to keep making all these little tweaks to get what you're looking for. All right, so the particles are lasting on the screen too long. So as far as start lifetime, let's bring that down to like 0.8. And ultimately, since this is meant to be a burst, it's not going to keep going on, but we need it to keep running right now so we get a sense of what it looks like. So let's take one of the points. Whoops. Let's undo that. Let's take one of these points and shrink it. Again, if you want to do this in the interface, that would be shape, and you're changing the radius. Watch how it changes. Okay. Let's move this over a little bit just so it's easier to see, so it's not being covered by the camera. So a couple things. Still not enough particles. So let's bump that up to like 250, so we double the particles. Also, it's kind of bland just seeing white. So let's start. So color over lifetime. Click on this. The bottom is the color. The top is the alpha. So basically the transparency. So what we're going to do is we click here. And think of this as the duration. So it starts at this and it ends at this. Okay. So we're going to start at, I don't know, maybe we can start like a red, a deep red. And have it become a yellow. And what you could do is, right now this is a linear change. If you want to have it hold a certain color, you could just click down here and create another one. So like if I right click, it creates a keyframe, and I could keep this at, say, the full red. So let's make this 255.00. Click on this one, click here, 255.00. So now it doesn't change at first. It holds that color for a longer period of time and then changes in a linear fashion. And looking at that, it really doesn't look quite full enough yet. So what we're going to do is, before we increase the rate, we're going to come up here and increase max particles just to make sure we don't hit the max. Bump that up to like 1500. So now let's put this up to 400. And there we go. That's much more full. See how that looks on top of him. So that really is a little bit too big because it's like going off the edge, which doesn't necessarily preclude it from being usable. Doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong, but I kind of want to shrink that in a little bit. So now we go to one of two things. You can either change the start lifetime, or if you think it's just moving too fast, you can change the start speed. So we're actually going to change the start speed a little bit. So that in itself shrunk it. And I'm going to make the lifetime be 0.7. And so now it goes right to the edge. We're going to increase the rate just one more time. And then we're going to do something else. We're going to have the particles shrink over time. So size over lifetime. Click here. And just take this point and drag it down. Now, just like the color, we're going to create a keyframe in the middle here so it doesn't shrink right away. So just as we didn't want the color to change right away, we don't want it to shrink right away. So it keeps its size and then it shrinks. All right, let's run this. Okay, everything is kind of dark. You're on a gray background, so this doesn't show up that great. So you might decide that, all right, well, we'll just keep the white dots. That's your choice. And the way you would do that is if you uncheck this, it only goes to white dots. So in other words, if you uncheck something, you don't lose your settings. It just doesn't apply them anymore. So leave it up to you if you want it to be like that or like that. I think because of the gray, it makes the orange disappear. So either way. Now, we only want it to happen once. So we need to make the duration. Well, what we do is we get rid of looping. And we don't want it to last 5 seconds because there's two different timers. There's start lifetime, which is how long each individual particle lasts, and duration, which is how long it keeps creating new particles. So let's bring this down to like 0.2, and then we will run it again. It's a little bit too short. How about 0.7? 0.6. Doesn't have to be perfect. We'll do like 0.55 and then leave it at that. Okay, so let's take this and change the name to hit effect. And just drag and drop it down here, and that turns it into a particle system. Now we want to remove that. And now what we want to do is instantiate this when there's an attack. So just as we instantiate that fireball, we want this to get instantiated when they hit the enemy. So how do we do that? So we're going to go to, okay, so we already got the scripts open. Battle flow, like I said, controls really effects that don't necessarily, or not just effects, but functionality that isn't necessarily associated with any one object. We can have it get instantiated here, or we can have it instantiated at the individual character levels. I'm thinking it's going to be easier to instantiate it at the individual character levels because they already look for attacks. They're already looking for collisions. So let's go to enemy con. I'm going to add what's known as a transform variable up here. So public transform, capital T, and it's going to be, so we already use hit effect, so we don't want to make it exactly the same, but we want to make sure when we see the name of the variable come up, we know what it does. So we'll call it hit effect, and then PS for particle system, or OBJ for object. Yeah, let's do OBJ, because I said that I tend to use OBJ to represent objects. So let's save that. So the enemy con script is attached to the enemy. So we click on the enemy and you can see there's the new hit effect object variable. So we take the hit effect and we put it on there. So the enemy object is now aware, for want of a better term, of this object. It's aware of it and can do things to it, such as instantiate it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to look to see when the enemy is hit. So if the enemy is hit, so this controls the fireball. So what I'm looking for is the enemy's hit point getting reduced. So the enemy's hit point is enemy HP, so it happens within the enemy script. Okay, so right here. So battleflow.damage display equals Y. So it's saying, okay, go ahead and display the damage. That's when the enemy's hit points get reduced. So this is where we want the explosion to appear. So instantiate that new object. So hit FX object. So that is what is getting instantiated. Now we have to say where it's getting instantiated. Well, it's going to get instantiated right where the enemy is. So transform.position. And then the third argument is the rotation. So we want to use the object's own rotation. So hit effect object dot rotation. So what's going to happen is when the enemy gets damaged, the explosion gets instantiated. And that's what we're trying to do. There we go. So the timing isn't quite right because of the fireball. You can always just change the speed of the fireball if you want. But, and as you can see, because it's based on damage, I don't have to redesign it for this character. So no matter which character is attacking, since it's based on them getting damage, it's already happening. It's already coded for that. So not perfect, but again, you can tweak that to get a little bit more towards your liking. Possibly what you could do is you could create a delay, because right now this just says, okay, if damage display is set to yes, then go ahead and subtract the damage and instantiate this. Maybe you could create a delay where the instantiation happens just before the enemy hit points gets modified. So put in like a half a second delay, that kind of thing. So now let's do the same thing to the characters. They need to get attacked. So that's going to be a little bit tougher. So the enemy So now what I'm looking for is where the characters get their damage when they're damaged. So it's not within their scripts. It's not within... Okay, here it is. So it's within the enemy con script, within the enemy returns, because we said, so we do the random range. If the character is dead, we change the random range. And then we go ahead and say this is the one that is getting attacked and minus the hit points. But we really don't want the damage to really appear until the enemy has contacted them. However, having said that, that's what this does. It gives a delay. So the delay has already occurred. So what we can do now is, since this tells us this is the witch, and this is the suit, we can just put the instantiate command in there. So we're just going to grab this same line, put it here, put it here, but we can't use transform.position because it's going to be here or here. So that means we just need to manually put in the actual vector 2. So 6.7 and 2.3. Actually, I think it's negative 6.7. And then the F, since it's a decimal, and 2.3 F. Yeah, negative 6.7. And so, again, 6.7, but this one should be lower, so it's almost symmetric. So we'll just copy this, paste it here, and then we will just about be done. We'll save this. So she attacks, there's explosion. She attacks, there's explosion. They attack, there's explosion. She attacks, there's explosion. She attacks, there's explosion. There you go. So the effect, the particle system is kind of not really that impressive, but again, you've carved out the coding, you've carved out where it's going to happen. Now you can just tweak the actual visual effect. And the last thing that you need to do is you need to destroy those, because even though you don't see those particle systems, they're still there. So if you go to hierarchy, see, they're all still there, and that's not good memory management. So in a game like this, not a big deal, but it's easy enough to fix. And so you just add a script to the hit effect that says, well, let's just do it. So right-click, create C#, and we'll call this destroy, and we'll just call it destroy FX. Maybe we'll come up with a single script that destroys all the FX based on different timers. So you take hit effect, put the destroy FX script onto it. You now open that script. Okay. And for destroy FX, you're just going to do in the start, destroy game object, comma, 1. That is, it waits 1 second and then destroys the game object. So visually, it really won't be too much different. Actually, 1 isn't quite right, because the FX, it runs for 0.55 seconds, and all the particles last for 0.7 seconds. So that means the last particle will still be on the screen for 1.25 seconds. So we just change it to 1.25. And that should do it. So visually, you shouldn't see any difference with that. It just cleans up that, gets rid of those objects, that they're not still there. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll go up here to Window, go to Hierarchy. See, they're not there. So visually didn't impact what you see, but it's better memory management. It gets rid of those unused redundant assets. So that should be it for today's lesson. And I think that after this, we will finally get into the UI. I mentioned that a couple times now, but the more I thought about this, I kind of wanted to jazz it up a little bit more. So we'll probably start working on the UI in the next one. So that's when you'll see like the actual health bars for the heroes, the health bar for the enemy, Maybe we'll put it like in the lower right corner here so it's not blocking anything. So that should about do it for this one.